Okay, great. Thank you. Call the regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Finance for November 16th to order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let me begin, as I said I would, introducing, we have guests with us today, board members of the Board of Finance elect, Mike Doyle and Bert Helfand. So congratulations. I think as Art was mentioning, this is a 6-year sentence. So when it begins, you'll have to serve your time. Hi, Linda.
Hi, sorry I'm late.
That's okay. That's all right. So congratulations. The changing of the guard will take place December, Maria, help me, 4th or 5th, right?
6th, I think.
So
December 6th, close, December 6th.
Okay, great. So you're stuck with a couple of us for one more meeting after this, the tri-board with Kevin and I, and then you guys will be off on your own graces, all right?
Can somebody remind me what the date is of that tri-board meeting?
December 1st.
December 1st.
Make sure it's in there. Oh, okay, yeah, it's in my calendar. All right.
And that is going to be an in-person meeting, correct?
Ooh.
We were actually discussing that today.
Okay.
I think it's TBD.
Okay. All right. Fine. Be a lot of faces on the screen, but we did it last year. Did we do it last year? Virtual? Yeah. Okay.
We did it virtual last year, yeah.
Yep. Great. So Eric and Maria here are also visiting, so we appreciate that.
So I actually have one quick introduction before you move on. You'll see that
Please.
there is a new face on the screen, Kelsey Chamberlain. She is actually our new Deputy Finance Director.
Yeah.
Wanted to bring her on, introduce her. She will be a familiar face going forward, and you will be stuck with her if I am out for any reason. So just wanted to get you familiar with her and get her familiar with the meetings.
Excellent. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
The sheer entertainment value of these meetings should be all the you need for losing your Tuesday in the evening.
Can't wait.
Let's begin then with the town budget status report. Amy?
Okay, just let me share my screen. Okay, so since it's the beginning of the fiscal year, we're only 3 months in, there's not like a ton to share, but I'll go through a couple of the highlights that I have noted. So if we go all the way to the bottom, we'll see that our budget was about 106 million. Right now we're at about almost 53 million, which is about 50% of our budget. This is typically where we are about this time of year due to our tax revenue. So as you know, we have our tax revenue that comes in twice a year, July and January. So obviously we've completed our July collection at about 54% of the budget. And therefore that drives a lot of our revenue where we're already at 50% of revenues for the year. The only other thing I wanted to highlight here is our insurance refunds. As you know, we have our members' equity distribution that we get from KERMA from participating in that program. We typically do a conservative budget for this number, about 27,000. We've had some good experience over the last couple of years, and that experience has given us additional funds above and beyond what we budgeted. And this year is no exception. And we came in at about $57,000 or about $30,000 over budget. On to the expenditures. This bigger. So our expenditures were about 22 million or 21% of budget, pretty much in line with where we're supposed to be. We should be at about 25% of budget. And then a few items here. Actually, I think just one item here I wanted to point out. Under the police department, you'll see here that we are at about almost $1.2 million in expenditures as of September 30th. And compared to the same time last year, we were only at 970. So we've increased this year about 190,000 compared to the same time last year. That's because last year we had some police vacancies that we do not have this year. So I believe that there were filled positions, something along those lines, in the prior year, and then the positions were filled in this year.
Are all the budgeted positions full at this point?
That would be a question for Maria.
We currently have several recruitments underway at the moment.
So that would be no.
Yeah, the answer is no.
Right.
So would you expect at this current rate that they'll end up below or above the budget?
Meaning we would overspend, or?
We're comparing to last year's actual, and there's a negative variance compared to last year's actual because there were vacancies. So you're saying that you're not going to overspend that without coming back.
No.
Yeah, right.
They've only spent 23% of the budget and they're
Right.
25% of the year in, so.
Yeah, good. Okay. All right.
Amy, one thing that might be helpful in future summaries, as we sort of project what year-end savings, can we add a column if you think we're going to have savings at the end? Like, obviously we are in the police department, there are several vacancies, so that's going to be a year-end savings of some amount because that hasn't been spent and you can't go back and respend it, right?
It's hard to predict though, because you don't know when you're going to fill the vacancy. So.
Not, but for now, but for current year, we know that that money hasn't been spent, so we can book that as some savings, right?
No, the prior year had vacancies. The current year,
Still has vacancies.
Yeah.
not in the police department.
No,
Maria
we
just said they
misunderstood what
recruited.
Maria said.
I'm sorry, I thought you were just referring to positions in general. The police department, we are actually now fully staffed amongst our sworn positions.
That was my question. Okay.
That
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood the question. I thought you just meant organization-wide, but
Okay.
police, we are actually fully staffed for the first time in quite some time amongst our sworn positions.
Okay, great.
If I could, just building on the point that Lisa made, and when you read this through on expenditures, to me, at least the underlying was, are we in trouble or not? Are we doing well or not? What's the end of the year going to look like? I mean, if we were to put after apples variance, if there were a column that said expected end of year, now I realize that's extrapolation, but just look at legal. We spent 42% of the budget. Should we be concerned? Are we going to, does that mean we're going to have a very large legal expenditure that it wasn't foreseen or not? But I find myself going through this and taking note of what we are, but not knowing what it means. Is there a way we can address that with an additional column?
So this early in the year, no. I honestly don't know where things are going to be ending up 3 months into the year. If I had to give you a projection as to year end, it's going to be basically what the budget is, unless we know something, say like that comes in early in the year, like our pension payment, like our ARC payment or something like that, if we had some savings there. But that's something I would point out during the quarterly. But, the legal services that you pointed out, I mean, so it looks like we're going to exceed budget by the end of the year, right? We're already at 42% of our expected budget. But a lot of that probably has to do with our labor negotiations and our arbitrations, and those are going to be done within the next month or so. And then that expenditure line item will decrease, well, not decrease, but it'll remain stable. It won't keep increasing as time goes on. So we could still very well be within budget. I could put in some year-end projections, probably closer to around, say, like the March, April timeframe when I report out. But this early in the year, it's just way too early for me to even guess where we're going to land.
Well, then is there a way, Amy, to add a narrative?
She does. I was just going to say, I think she sort of does with the cover memo, and then by highlighting those handful of items she did when we went through it, she's giving us a heads up that these are areas that we will either were meaningfully positive or meaningfully negative, which for the first quarter I think is adequate.
While I'm at it, if I could just ask about numbering the pages. I mean, we've suggested that the pages be numbered and they weren't. And then we requested that the pages be numbered and they aren't. And when we get together with each other, I say, we got a problem on page 16. Well, there is none. I mean, I don't want to have to introduce a resolution directing you to number the pages, but is there a problem with this or why don't you do it? I don't get it.
So that was my oversight, and Lisa did ask me, and I forgot for this packet, so it was just an oversight. It can be
No
added.
worries. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay.
Can I go back to the line on legal services since Art brought it up?
Sure.
Amy, you said it might be about labor negotiations. Were there no labor negotiations last year? Because what concerned me most was, and maybe I'm remembering wrong, but I think, there somewhere in the past history, if it was last year or the year before, there was a big increase in legal fees because of some lawsuits by former employees that we hadn't anticipated. And so I would have expected to see this year's actual year-to-date be less than last year's actual year-to-date, and it's actually 3 times as much. So were there no labor negotiations last year?
I can take
No.
that.
Yeah, go ahead, Maria.
Sure. So you may recall that we received policy directive, particularly from this board, with some of our remaining bargaining groups that still have the DB plan open, to see that closed. As you can imagine, their parent organization is deeply opposed to that. That is not an item we have been able to resolve amicably. So we are in arbitration for our successor collective bargaining for 3 of our groups represented by CSCA. As Amy indicated, those proceedings are towards the wrapping up process. It will be some time before the arbitration award is awarded to us, but arbitration is costly. So we have those open arbitration cases. As you mentioned previously, we had some termination cases. We were successful in having those termination cases upheld, but there is a cost, right, when you go to arbitration, and that was an arbitration case as well. And within the last few years, we also had an arbitration case for the police pension plan, right, which was restructuring. Again, we were successful in that case, and we estimated about $1 million in savings over a 15-year period. But again, there is a legal cost to arbitrate that case. So I would say those are probably the key arbitration cases that have driven our legal expenses the last few years.
Okay, and so those arbitration costs came in the first quarter of this year?
We have been working through the arbitration proceedings summer for the successor collective bargaining agreements, that is. Summer of 2021, we're still working through those proceedings through the fall. So summer and fall.
Okay, because that's what's confusing me was, the comparison to the same quarter last year. But let me applaud you for tackling the defined benefit plan. I'm very happy to hear that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so moving on to the Simsbury Farms, the Park and Rec Fund.
Sorry, can I ask you one more before you move?
Yeah, go ahead.
One more line of the general fund expenditures was community services. That's at 72% of where, if we expect we should be at 25% because it's 1 quarter of the year. I don't know what all is included there, but can you give us a little footnote about that one? Why it's 3 times as much as it was last year at this, or no, it's 1/3 more than last year.
Hold on.
It's 2 lines below legal services.
So this is just the timing of payment. So the community services includes the public agency support that we have that's approved during the budget for say SCTV and the other nonprofit organizations. So it's just the timing of when they submitted their request for payment. So this year, like we're already at 80% of our budget within our public agency support requests.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate the explanation. Those little things you might want to footnote in future years, just so that you won't get questions like this from us again.
I had one minor question on revenues, Amy.
Sure.
For the building department, it's showing that our year-to-date is a little bit less than last.
Oh, yeah.
And I just wanted to that seems a little different. I was surprised by that, given the additional appropriation for the new building inspector. I was just wondering what sort of the background is there.
So I can check with Mike on this, but I'm going to go out and guess. Last year we had the housing boom, which was pretty consistent within each of the months. And then I think our typical season is that our revenue within the first quarter, probably even through the second quarter, is typically lower, around this probably 18-20%. And then we have the boom around the spring when all of the projects come up. But I will verify that with Mike and get back to you.
Okay,
I
Maria?
can elaborate a bit too, Amy, for you. So one of the key trends we saw in the first quarter of this fiscal year, which was really unusual, which we had spoke a bit about during the supplemental appropriation, is we've had a very significant and unexpected uptick in residential permits. So oftentimes residential permits are lower dollar value. It's still work, right? It's processing the permit, it's having to go out and inspect, but a lot of times residential permits, it's things like decks, sheds, pools, a new roof, versus commercial permits, which might be fewer number-wise in terms of number of permits you're processing, but perhaps much larger in dollar value because of the construction value. So again, we had a lot of permit activity, but it was more on the residential side this past quarter. And then also last year was our most building permit revenue we've ever received ever. So last year was definitely an outlier year in that regard.
So that makes sense. It's mostly little projects that are taking up people's time as opposed to big dollar. Okay, thank you.
Maria? Any other questions on the revenues and expenditures for general fund? Okay. So moving on to the Simsbury Farms Fund. We are at revenues exceeding expenditures by about $7,500 in comparison to the same time last year, where we're in the hole about $45,000. So you're going to see like those major trends within our recreation programs and our Simsbury Farms complex programs. So total recreation programs, 314,000 compared to 148 last year. As obviously, last year we were in the middle of COVID. We canceled some programs, restricted some programs, and this year some of those restrictions were lifted. We were able to offer more programs and therefore the increase in revenue. Same thing here, except mainly related to the pool. You'll remember that the pool was closed for part of the year, or that we had limited access after the pool was open. Then moving down to golf, you'll see that we have a decrease compared to the same time last year. We did see a surge during COVID of increased golf fees. If I were to guess, this is probably more within the range of where we would typically see it.
We also had a lot of rain this summer and a drought last summer, so golfers could play more last year.
Very, very true. There's definitely more opportunity last year. And then moving down to our expenditures, the golf course, you'll see that there's a decrease of 146,000. This is just due to some timing. Last year, there was a large equipment purchase that happened in the first quarter last year that was non-recurring in the current year. And then we also had, let me see my notes. We had the annual required contribution for our pension fund that came out in the first quarter. Actually, our ARC payment increased last year this year compared to last year. So last year it was around 30,000 and this year it was around 80,000. So the reason for the increase there is our actuaries, Milliman, were able to give us a accurate breakdown employee by employee of our Parks and Rec fund and our WPCA fund. So we were actually undercharging that fund in previous years. I think that might have come up during budget. And then moving down to the special programs. Obviously, we see an increase in programs, so we see an increase in expenditures to run those programs. That's the majority of the increase there. And then the last one is the Simsbury Farms Administration. Hold on. Oh, I'm sorry. The golf course was just the equipment purchase, and then the Simsbury Farms Administration is where we have our pension ARC payment. So the increase from last year, which makes way more sense, with a $50,000 increase going from 30,000 to 80,000. Any questions on the Simsbury Farms Fund?
Just a comment to say, I don't know if Tom Taberski's listening, but kudos to Tom for Seeing an increase in revenues and a decrease in expenditures for the same period. Yay. And ending in the black for the quarter.
Yes, congratulations. Amy, just a quick clerical question. At the bottom, when it says 7 balance 7-1, is that 7-1-21?
Yes, Linda caught that earlier. It's 7/1/21, and then I used the template from June, so this should actually be as of September.
9/30/21.
Right, so to match for the period ended 9/30, that should have been updated to 9/30 as well.
And that's 9/30/21?
Yes.
Yeah.
What are you saying? What are you saying?
Who's that?
I don't know.
Somebody's got a kid probably. That's
Okay, moving on to the health insurance fund, our favorite fund. So here, excess revenues over expenditures for the first quarter of about almost 1.2 million, mainly related to our claims experience. We will see that our claims this year about 2.3 million for this first quarter. Last year, they were about 3.1 million. So down about $800,000. And if you look at where we were last year, the difference between the 300,000 versus the 1.1 is about that $800,000. Moving down to our reserves, you'll see that our reserves are about 6.5 million, and this is 44% of expected claims. And as I say, every single quarter, we should be at the targeted 20 to 25% of expected claims. So this will be likely a good budget discussion item, either during tri-board or during the budget prep period.
absolutely.
And Amy, again, is that 9:30 instead of 6:30 for this?
Yes, they're all 9:30.
Got it. Oh, I was, that makes sense. I thought we were comparing last year. All right, thank you.
Okay, and I think there was only two more things I wanted to share with you. On the special revenue funds, I was talking to Linda earlier, and we had done a breakdown of all of each of these funds, where they originated, what they're for, things of that nature. And she thought that we had closed out some of those funds. So I went back and looked, and we did go through each of the funds, but we didn't vote on closing any out. So I can add that to the next agenda if you all are interested in doing that.
I think that'd be a good idea.
Yep. Just if you can help us understand which ones we can close out.
Yep.
I know you said some of them, like the DARE program, if it has money, I mean, even though there's nothing going on with that program, evidently, if there's some federal money or state money, you can't close it until it's spent. So, you need to give us guidance on
Will do.
how we can proceed there.
Yep.
And-
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I may have missed this because I thought, have we gotten to the pension page yet?
No.
Okay, I'll hold until you get to that.
That was actually where I was going next.
Ah.
So typically this fund looks pretty standard across the board for each of the pension funds. This year it looks a little bit different just due to the timing of our ARC payment. You'll see that the general government, the police, and the OPEB fund are all in the negative, while the Board of Ed fund is in the positive. So if you look at top of the contributions, 112,000 for general fund, 88 for police, and then you have this huge one for 1.4 for the Board of Ed, and then $35,000 for OPEB. On the Board of Education side, we were able to make our annual required contribution, or our ARC payment, where it was expended and also posted in the pension trust fund as of September 30th. However, on the general government, police, and OPEB, the general government and police, we expended it at the end of September, but it wasn't received by the pension fund until October. So we'll see that being charged against the next quarterly financial statement. And then on the OPEB, our valuation has not been completed by Milliman yet, so we don't know what our contribution will be. So when that contribution is done, we will be able to insert the contribution for the ARC here, and then they'll be more in line. So I just wanted to point that out since they looked a little odd. And then Lisa, what was your?
First of all, thank you, because I had actually called Amy on that, and she did, as always, a great job explaining it. And this stuff, sometimes when you look at a snapshot in time, you didn't get the full story behind it. But I know this is one of Kevin's last meetings, and one of the things I just want to thank Kevin for all your work on the pension and really tap your brain just a little bit to give a quick summary of sort of where we are. I know I've been asked, how have our pension investment returns been doing? And could we just get a general update from you on sort of what you're seeing?
I mean, generally overall, the pension funds have been performing in line. Last year, this year, they're probably overperforming from a historical average, but so is the market. I guess, I know that we've been trying to move the return rate down slowly over the years, which makes sense. I guess we're at 6.5 or 6 3/4 now, Lisa.
A little over, yeah.
A little over. So we're trying to move that down, which makes sense. If we, the portfolios perform in the range of a moderate portfolio. So if we thought about what a moderate portfolio does, it should do half of what the S&P does. And on average, the S&P returns about 9% a year. So these portfolios are expected to return 6 3/4%, but in reality, the way they're constructed, they're returning somewhere in the range of 5 to 5.5%.
Thank you. And that's going to come up later, I know, with Amy and when we get in the discussion of the budget of what the pension investment assumption should be. And Amy, you made a good point that the public might not know, even though we do a snapshot in time, the actuary looks at a time over 20 years in making their predictions.
Correct. So that's all I have for highlights, unless somebody else has any other questions on any other items.
I'm sorry, I do, because my brain moves more slowly than yours does, Amy. Can we go back to the special revenue funds? I had a couple of questions on a couple of them. The social services program, and actually, now that I know the dates are different, I probably need to rethink it, but it just struck me that there's a fair amount of money in there and not a lot of expenditure and more in donations than there is in expenditures. Can you help me understand where the donations come from? And if we have all this money, why aren't we spending it? There's got to be some people out there in need.
What page are you, Linda?
13.
Thanks.
So that's a valid question. I can get some more detail from our social services director. So the grants the donations come from private citizens, they come from banks, they come from corporations, mostly people that want to donate to the food program. During COVID, we did see an uptick. We were able to utilize our trust. And then in addition to that, we were able to, for all of the gift cards that we had seen an increase in expenditures for, we were able to get reimbursed by FEMA. So it really didn't have a huge impact on our special revenue fund because we were able to get the majority of that money back. Kristen and I have talked about the high balance in this fund, and she is looking for ways to utilize that money. But as of right now, I think she's just supporting her current programs, and we really should come up with a plan to start utilizing some more of that money. But it's just hard to utilize when the donations typically come with restrictions. So if it is for the food program, we have to make sure it's for the food program. If
Right.
it's for resident assistance, we have to use it for that. So I mean, I hate to say too much money is a good thing.
Right.
It's a good thing.
True. Yeah, it doesn't hurt to have a cushion. It just concerned me that people were donating and it's not being spent.
Yeah.
that, you know, if they knew, they might not be happy about that. Can you tell me about the community development grant and just remind people what that's for? Because that doesn't have any expenditures in there.
So this is a grant that goes back, I want to say the 80s maybe. And this is information that I got from the previous deputy finance director. This was a small cities grant that was supposed to be used for housing rehabilitation in Terriffill. And it was supposed to be a loan program to Terriffill residents to do any sort of rehabbing that they needed on their house infrastructure. And they could take out this loan basically from the town. So this money was given to us, I believe it was federal money, CDBG, yes, it's federal money. And we were given that money not as a reimbursement grant, we were just given that money. I believe that there are 2 loans that are still outstanding, and the only time that they have to do anything with those loans is if they sell the house. So when they sell the house, that's when they repay the money to the town. Obviously, we didn't spend all of the grant money, or what we did spend, we were able to recoup and put back into the fund for that $200,000. But this balance goes back so far. I mean, we probably have to reach out to the federal government or the state via the federal government and see what we need to do with that money, because we can't legally spend it. So I don't know if they are going to request it back eventually, or if we should just, you know, kind of take the initiative and reach out to the state and or the federal government and say, want it back. Or, you know, what can we do with it? So that's kind of like that's a mini project that did put on Kelsey's plate.
And now that you tell us the whole story, it does sound familiar.
Yeah, Amy, I could add to that a little bit. So,
Okay.
you know, running a housing rehabilitation loan program is something that I've had experience with in the past. And so typically the way that these programs work is that, you know, you get the repayments, they come back into your portfolio, and then you loan them back out to folks that meet the low to moderate income eligibility criteria. Typically, the HUD guidelines are that you can use about $30,000 per rehab project. They are in current program guidelines, they are no interest loans, and they have to be for, you know, infrastructure that are typically structural in nature or energy efficiency improvements. So things like, you know, repairing your foundation, replacing your windows, working on your roof, spoilers, systems, things of that nature. But as Amy indicated, that this goes so far back in the 1980s, the guidelines were a bit different. And this is also at the time targeted for a specific neighborhood, which you see that's more common now as it's town-wide. And so Mike Linden and I have had some conversations about this particular portfolio, and he's had that on his to-do list as well, to reach out to our program rep at the state to see if we can essentially move forward with reloaning out the money and again, essentially using it. It should have been a revolving loan fund many decades ago, but we lost sight of that as a town. And so we essentially have to rebuild our policies and procedures and infrastructure to be able to reloan out that money. But it really is a wonderful program. I've seen so many really good things happen with it. It would just be tremendous if we can reloan that money back out. But as Amy said, it's a little bit of a project and we've been a bit busy, but the hope would be that we could reloan that money out to folks.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Rob, do you want me to just move on to the Board of Ed quarterly budget status report?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So this one is pretty quick. There's only a couple of things here. So under the revenues, I'm just going to point out a couple of the grant awards that have pretty much been finalized or that we know are pretty solid going forward. And then I'll report out on the remaining once we have solid numbers for those grants. So the Open Choice Academic and Social Support Grant, we have an award of about almost $197,000 in the current fiscal year. And it's about a $10,000 increase compared to last year.
Amy, what page are you on?
It should be right after the town quarterly financial reports, right after the CNR.
22, Linda.
Thanks. Oh, okay, got it.
And then down below, the second to the last one, the IDA Part B and preschool grant, we had a final award of about $1,078,000 in the current fiscal year, which is an increase of about $33,000 compared to the prior fiscal year. Moving on to the American Rescue Plan, the ARPA IDA money, we received a preliminary award of about $223,000. So you'll notice that this is a new award in the current year. It is ARPA money that is to be used specifically for special education. And then there's two down from that, the emergency connectivity funding. This one I am super, super excited about. This was just an email that happened to come through the district, and we just decided to take a shot and apply for the money, thinking, I don't know, maybe like $10,000, $20,000. And then we were actually awarded $260,000 to purchase some Chromebooks and get reimbursement for our hotspots during the year. So that was a major win for us that I'm super psyched about.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Moving down to the expenditures, any variances here are typically just due to the timing of when payments are booked. They are noted within the narrative. And I'll speak to the few that are not related to timing. So under the general control, you'll see that there's a decrease in spending from salary savings. And as you've heard multiple times, the decrease is related to the shared services between the town and the Board of Education for financial services. So it's the gift that keeps on giving. And then under transportation, you'll see a decrease in expenditures here for our regular transportation. At the beginning of the last school year during the summer, we had paid out in advance to Salters some funding for COVID relief to get him through the summer months of his operations. So that's non-recurring for this year. And therefore you're seeing the decrease in expenditures. And then moving on to the new and replacement equipment, you'll see the decrease in expenditures here. As last year, you'll know that we were preparing for a hybrid education. So we had to prepare for in-person, we had to prepare for hybrid. And so at the beginning of the year, we were purchasing Chromebooks and computers and laptops and cameras. And since we have all of that technology, now there's no need to incur those expenditures at the beginning of the year. And that's all I have for highlights on the Board of Education side, if there's any questions there.
I had a question about the enrollment, Amy. I don't know if you know this off the top of your head. It's not part of your responsibilities, but
That's okay.
you know, there was a lot of expectation at the beginning of COVID when enrollment actually was way below what they expected. They expected enrollment to come popping way back up. And so I don't know, you know, it did go up this year, but what did they budget the year on? What was the expectation before the numbers actually came in? Is 4,029 less than they were expecting to return? Did all of those kids that stayed in private school and homeschooling come back?
So the majority did come back. Those are fabulous questions. And I happen to know that I can give you some insider information, and this will be presented to you at Tri-Board.
Okay.
The enrollment king is there, Neil. He gave the presentation to the Board of Education already, and he has all of the statistics as to what we use based on Milliman's projections, how close we came into Milliman's projections, and where we expect to be for next year as well.
One of the phenomenon last year was the parents who kept their kids out of kindergarten, in particular, kindergarten, however you say it. And there was a lot of speculation about whether they would come back and do kindergarten a year late or go straight to first grade. So we will be on pins and needles to hear the result of that.
Well,
Do you
I'll
think
give you a
it's
little
right,
sneak
Kelsey?
peek that they came back to kindergarten.
All right. Spoiler alert.
Yes.
All right.
So, but do you know offhand, Amy, is this 4,029 what they budgeted expecting, or less than, or more than?
I think it's pretty much in line. I don't remember what the Milliman projections were for this year. I think we were a little bit higher than Milliman's projections, so I think we made it budgeted a little bit lower.
Okay.
I want to say around 4,000 or so.
Okay. Can I go back to, I keep doing this, sorry, the capital non-recurring fund schedule? And ask one question there. And this may be that I just don't quite understand the labeling, but about a little more than halfway down through, that's page 21, Art, is a line called equipment. And so under appropriations, 104,000.
Mhm.
And then current year, so I'm assuming that means some 7,000 additional was appropriated this year.
Yep.
And, okay, so I got the labeling right. So how did we wind up, tell me about the uncommitted balance. It's,
Yep. So this is something that Lisa actually asked about earlier as well. So prior to me coming on board, the way that they did their budgeting is you'll see that they had like the big buckets. They had school buses, equipment, they would have interior improvements, exterior improvements, and whatever fit into those buckets is what they would utilize for their CNR. They were not like per project based like they are going forward.
okay.
So wherever the money is, that's where they would spend it out of. So this year, it's not wherever the money is, that's where we spend it. It's take it out of the correct line. And then we'll reallocate when we close it out. So that 256 is offset by the other large buckets that you'll see above it, the exterior, the plumbing, the interior, the ceiling, roof, buses, that nature. So when we close it out, we'll be even, but.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Both boards, financial review, we appreciate that. And we will move to the supplemental appropriation request. Who's going to do this? Amy, Maria?
Maria's been involved more closely than I have, so I'll let her take this.
It's a really nice ditch we built, though.
It's
They're
a
good
very
photos.
visible location.
Yeah.
So just quickly, oh my goodness, it was mid to late October now. A slope failure on our Owensbrook open space parcel was reported to staff. So we had gone out to inspect that, confirmed the slope failure. We also found that the culvert that was essentially allowing Owensbrook to pass freely must have collapsed and was blocked. We think, again, in part because of the slope failure had caused a number of trees to collapse as well. And it was an imminent potential public safety risk on two fronts. Because it was very close to the apartment complex that's right next door to this parcel. So we had a concern about it continuing to erode the embankment and that particular parcel. And then also for flooding purposes. So I was sharing with a number of folks on staff that I was initially in the field when we found this with 3 of our engineers on staff. And I said, I'm not an engineer, but this looks really bad. And they confirmed that it was really bad. So we did unfortunately have to conduct emergency repairs to the site. Again, it is in a very visible location. They did find the masonry. Kind of a neat little fact about the masonry is it's actually historic masonry. We think it probably dates to the late 1800s. And we will be able to maintain some of the aesthetics of that, but we will be replacing it with, modern infrastructure. So we are in the process of regrading, installing the infrastructure to ensure that it will be in essentially a safe condition. Additionally, while we were in there, we discovered a large amount of invasives. So that's now all gone on about 3 acres of the parcel. And we've consulted with the Conservation Commission chair, and I think have a good plan for moving forward to ensure good invasive management on that parcel.
Any other questions regarding this? I think the issue is we're going to pay for this out of the capital reserve fund. Is that correct, Amy? Okay. I think I'm fine with that. So we do need to move this. So I'd be looking for a motion to move effective November 16th, 2021 to approve a supplemental appropriation for the Owens Brook Open Space Parcel Emergency Repairs in the amount of $66,000 utilizing the Capital Reserve Fund.
Almost.
So
moved.
Let's let Kevin move it. Will you second it, Art?
Sure.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great. All right. Next up is the preparation for the tri-board. And I'll kick this off and appreciate a lot of work that was done by Lisa and Amy in preparing for this. We started talking about doing the tri-board a little differently, I don't know, several months ago. And I think that we have a different approach we want to use this year that we hope will be more collaborative, more positive, and encourage both or all three boards to work together with information over the budgeting period as it becomes more well-known, rather than where we had gotten to in my tenure, to which was we gave a single guidance on expenditures, and that just was the first thing that was rolled. That grenade was rolled down the table at the beginning of the meeting, and there was a very strong negative reaction to that, and it was done off of imperfect information. So what we want to do this time is encourage, and we've communicated this to the boards and have at least their initial buy-in, is that we're going to start by listening to the other boards. This is a tri-board meeting, although it's always on the agenda as a Board of Finance meeting. It really is a meeting of each of the three boards. So we'll be looking to them to help us understand their priorities for the year, both in terms of initiatives, information about their already baked in fixed costs, issues that they have in terms of programs and developments that they want to do at both the Board of Ed and at the town. Same time, as a Board of Finance, we will give our usual reminder of the town policies and our priorities, which will include pension investment assumptions, targeted reserves, insurance fund goals. Help me, Lisa, I always forget one or two of these, but collection rate.
pension assumption, right?
Yeah.
And reserves.
Yeah. And so one of the things I think we want to talk about tonight is we're not going to come to a consensus on a single expense budget guidance, but we do want to, and we are asking the boards to think about a targeted tax increase that we can tolerate and provide the best services to our town. And again, this will be an iterative process. We don't have perfect grand list numbers. We won't, I don't even think, by the meeting on December 1st. And again, those will become more clear as we get into the new year. And that is such a big driver of the mill rate calculation that it is inappropriate to give a fixed expense budget. But we want to be sure that we're, as a group, thinking about what our goals are for the pension rate assumption, for a mill rate increase, and targeted fund balances. Now, we have policies on these, and so we'll remind each other of those. We are currently at a 675 pension rate assumption. We have intended to get down to 6.5. We've been on a path toward that from 7. I can't remember exactly where we ended up each year, but one year we didn't take the next step. Was that last year?
Last year.
Yeah. So we wanted to go to 6.5 last year, and we didn't. In the meantime, guidance now is more like 6.25. and it moves from year to year. And as Kevin reported, we didn't earn 6.5 or 675 last year. We earned less than that. But again, this is a rolling 20-year kind of number, and so it's a long investment period. Our target fund balance is 16.5%.
15.5.
What?
I think it's 15.5. I wanted 16.5, but it's 15.5.
All right. And we ended the year in excess of that because of good performance in several areas, including some of the ones I've mentioned, insurance and building department, some of these other things that we were particularly good at last year as a town, and the Board of Ed as well. We had lots of discussions every year about the collection rate. I think we've pretty much settled on using the 98.5%, and that assumption is sort of baked into our target fund balance percentage. And it's a little bit of cushion, we know that, but we think it's acceptable to the bonding agencies and rating agencies for our bonds, the way we go about this. I'm looking for a nod from Amy to say that that's what they would like us to do. And so if we do those things, and then we'll listen. We'll have some preliminary numbers that each of the other two boards will bring to the meeting. And so we'll be able to look at that, and we'll be able to notionally calculate what the mill rate increase will be, with an assumption on the grand list that is as good as it is the night of the tri-board, realizing that it won't be final. So I've talked quite a bit here. Are there questions about how we should go about this?
Chairman, I've got a question, or just to reaffirm your approach. I would like to make this less contestatory and confrontational it's been in the past. Last year, at one point after the Meadowwoods affair, you gave I thought, rather articulate statement of what the roles of the different bodies were, and in a constructive manner, and starting out on the right foot and inviting that we all work together constructively. I would love to hear you reiterate those basic points. I mean, there were statements came out of the Board of Selectmen that talked about the things we are legally obligated to do and called them a violation of their policy rights, and suggested even that we might not need to exist anymore. So I hope we're not there. I applaud your approach to this, to make it constructive, get off on the right foot. But I hope you'll look at your notes from that meeting and cast them in a very cooperative and positive vein, so that we know what our lanes are. And we do have legal obligations as far as appropriations and setting the mill rates. And I think in a non-confrontational but positive way, to state that we want to pursue those in a manner in which presents good government in working with our colleagues on the Board of Education, the Board of Selectmen. So I'm supporting you, and I just urge you to get back into that tone that you had, I thought, quite well a few months ago.
Great, appreciate that.
Rob?
Yeah.
Can we just sort of get clarity tonight if any current members or future members are thinking about changing policy? One of the things we talked about is it's very hard to change town policy in the middle of the budget process because things move so very quickly. And I know our board is sort of committed to do policy reviews over the summer, but we do have new members coming in. So just to confirm where I think we are, and then if other members could just let us know if I have it wrong. We're still at reserves at no less than 15.5, health savings fund balance at 20 to 25%, target debt service at 7%, but not to exceed 8%.
Right, I forgot that. It was one I was missing.
Pension investment assumption at
The small thing.
Yeah, the little thing. Pension investment assumption, we had targeted last year at 6.5. We want to make sure our board is still committed to that I know I am, in light of especially the recommendation that the target is actually now 6.25. It's going to be very hard not to do the 6.5 this year. And the tax collection rate at 98.5, which tends to bring in $500,000 to $600,000. And if you think about $106 million budget, that's like 0.5%. So that's within a reasoned rate. And the reason why we do that, and why I've done that in the past, is that oftentimes the revenues from the state have been iffy. They have been cut, and that enables you to absorb that. For a long time, we were at reserves at 12%. We're trying to inch our way up, so it was used for that. So there are different times we would use that money, and the way you use excess revenues or excess money that comes in during the year is generally to meet your obligations on reserves, general and health, do pensions, to fill lost revenues. So that's why you have a really tiny reserves, and our rating agencies have said they like this conservative budgeting approach. And to the extent people think it's a big number, it's actually a very small percent of the budget. So it's not some dramatic amount of money. But I also want to applaud Amy and Rob, who've really given a lot of thought to, and I think when we do the presentation, sort of how we see all these things together and what they look like, and very colorful. But I also wanted to sort of get a sense of, I think Rob was going to circulate some draft budget goals. Did you get a chance to do that, Rob?
I didn't email it, but we will. I'll send it today. We've seen most of this before, but we'll fill in these specific numbers that are in our policy and targets. And that way we at least know where we're grounded in those things, and there will be an opportunity to show the impact of certain things that we do. I think Lisa's done some work that we want to also be prepared to talk about as a board, which is not just the incremental increase of the tax rate, but comparing our taxes town to town on similarly priced houses, median priced houses, and recognize that this has been a long running issue for Simsbury as a place to come live relative to our surrounding towns. And so although an increment might be $50 a household, it's on top of a deficit against some of our peering towns in the $2,000 to $3,000 already relative tax burden. So we want to have those discussions, and we at the same time we want to listen. And so to Art's point, we want to hear what the Board of Ed feels is most important, and what they think their constituents, parents in particular, are willing to pay extra for the great education that the kids get in town. And their perspective might be different than what we hear from some taxpayers who are on fixed incomes or have been having difficulties. And so that's a natural tension that we have in the approach to all of this. So we should be able to hear that. But in the end, we're going to pull these three budgets and perspectives together and look at what the impact is on the taxpayers and say what we can or can't do and what we're going to recommend in terms of the ultimate mill rate. And I'm using the global we, right? All right.
Rob, is it worth sort of going through some tentative budget goals before we enter the tri-board, so we know what we're going to? Rob and I kind of pulled these together, consulted with a few of you. They're the ones we generally use. I don't think you'll see anything dramatic.
So, some of this is apple pie and motherhood, but, adopt a balanced budget. And that we want to balance affordability for taxpayers with the needs and wants of the town. Maintain the AAA rating. These are things that are sort of fundamental to every year's budget. In particular, we want reserves at no less than 15.5. We want the health savings fund balance at 2025. I think we've gone through these. Target debt service at 7, not to exceed 8% in out years. With the Latimer Lane project, we have already bumped up against the 8%, I believe, as we go out. So that's, right away that we know that the next project is coming probably from the Board of Ed. And so when will it come? What has to be moved? But to emphasize Lisa's point, it is uncomfortable to find yourself looking hard at a nearly final budget that breaks the policy that you just changed last year to allow for something. So that, I think, to change policy or make an exception same time is something we should work hard not to do. The collection rate I mentioned, and I think we should go for 6.5% on the pension. Right now, the grand list looks pretty flat year over year. We had the assessor on, and I'm now going to forget her name. I apologize. At our last meeting.
Francine.
Yeah, but so we know that this will change and it could go up or down going forward. But I think it's important to realize we can be wrong by having the grand list go up too little and then be surprised when it goes up and be happy. But we shouldn't be happy, because what that means is that we have overtaxed the taxpayers off of imperfect information. And now that money has gone into the general fund, which isn't bad, but it really, we should be very careful not to take it more than we have to from the taxpayers until we need it. That's always been my credo anyway. All right, other specific goals. A couple things we have to be aware of. We've often talked about a consumer price index that only went up 1 or 1.5%. We have 3% increases in budgets. Of course, this year we have the Social Security payments going up, over 5%. So we probably will get that thrown back in our face a little bit this year. But again, these things average up and average down. We've got to get to a balanced budget.
And Rob, with the COLA is 5.9, but the last inflation prediction was at 6.2. So they may be getting more money in their pocket, but they're spending more than they're.
Yeah, the cost of everything is going to go up. That's.
Yeah. I mean, that's going to be one of our challenges we face as a budget. The other thing we look at is sort of unemployment in town, and happy to report those numbers are going down. They, were at the 7s at the height of the pandemic, and they're now about 3.5. So that's a good indicator. I was talking with Eric earlier, and the need for social services went very high during the pandemic, but again, that's coming down. So we'll be monitoring that as well. I think one thing it's worth thinking about when you think about tax increases, what does that mean? And I think Rob hit on it. The average taxes is $9,000. 1% is $90 a year. 2% is $180, and so on. But the more expensive your house is, that number gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And the question is, where is that comfort level? But Rob made a really important point. It's not just that increment, but it's what is it doing in comparison to the other towns? Like right now, a taxpayer for the same house in Farmington is paying, over $2,000 more in taxes a year in Simsbury for that same house. So we're willing to pay a premium to live in Simsbury because we love Simsbury. We love our schools. We love our trails. We love our cute downtown. But at some point, that premium becomes a burden. And the question is, when is that tipping point? You don't want to get to the point where it's only $90, but actually now it's $2,090 more than what they're paying in Farmington. When does that tipping point hit? Because when it hits, home values start to decrease, because you can't charge as much if your taxes are high, and business stop to invest, and then you go on a spiral that is very hard to recover from. So we're looking at not just the increment for one person year over year, but looking at the change in mill rate over multiple towns. And the one thing I will say, I was talking with Eric earlier, we've made a lot of progress there. It used to be worse, but we've been trying to keep our budgets as modest as possible to try and narrow that gap, because we were worried that we were hitting a tipping point. But we'll be taking a look at that. Some of the numbers, I want to apply both Amy and Tom, who are digging a little bit deeper into the comprehensive annual financial reports in other towns, which is the most current information. The information that's published in the Circ Town profiles is about 2 years old. But that takes a lot of work. So I do want to recognize that. And we also suggested to Amy a few other charts that would be helpful to have, looking at 10-year look back over CPI, budget changes, and population changes, so we can sort of see trends and how are we doing and talk about where we want to go going forward. So those are a few things. So if people have specific data they want to see, it would be good to get it to Amy as soon as possible, because it does take time to do all that. And I want to commend both Amy and Tom for their work on that, because that is a lot of work and we do appreciate everything that they're doing very much.
Anybody have any specific topics that you want to be sure gets communicated to either of the other two boards at the tri-board?
I think you covered the waterfront.
Okay.
I just would ask that, and Amy said she will have it ready, the mill rate worksheets, so that we can then play with, okay, suppose the grand list comes in 1.5 instead of a quarter. What does that look like to the mill rate? What moves the mill and stuff like that?
Yeah, I really think that in this case, I'm glad to have that tool because we can respond in real time, but that the way I view it is that we will all get a chance to share priorities and goals, and then go back into our corners and work on the best possible budget we can, and then come back and say, a 55 mill rate looks great. And then we go back and say, all right, well, let's figure out how we can get back down to where we want to be. I suspect that's what the way the process will go, but it will, it empowers them more than us telling them what to do. And I think that's the point of the change in style. So.
Yeah, and I think our advice may change. Like at the tri-board, some of us might say, yeah, I could be comfortable with a 2 to 2.5% tax increase or 1%. But as we get new information on grand list, that guidance may change, just as nobody's completed their budgets yet. So we view it as an iterative. The one thing I think we're all committed to is communicating with each other when we get new information and say, oh boy, the grand list came in at negative 0.23%. That changes, just like a family. If you have less revenue, sometimes you have to make adjustments, or, oh, we had more revenue than we expected. That gives some positivity there. One thing Amy mentioned with the reserves on the health, and for new members or for members of the public who may not realize, we self-fund our health insurance, and having that big a reserve can often be used to offset increases in the budget. So normally we budget about 6 to 9% health increases, because that's a standard. But I think this year Amy had said she was going to plug in 4% in sort of projecting that, but that's a number that will be debated and maybe adjusted during the budget cycle. And that moves the budget quite a bit. And I don't know, Amy, if you want to speak to that a little bit, you know this better than I do, how that comes into play and how those decisions are made.
I think you did a good job giving the overall. So with our reserves currently where they are, we're actually already talking to our consultants locked in about what we should be doing with that excess money and who should be getting the benefit from it. Should it just be the town and the board? Should it be the employees? Should it be a combination of both? They have recently just sent us, I think this week or the end of last week, some policies that were put together by other towns and how they utilize those reserves. So that's something that'll be forthcoming down the line for you all to take a look at and see if you want to develop a policy around it, or if we just want to play around with it during budget and see what our different options are. So more to come on that as we get into the budget season.
But the good news is there's good news on health right now.
Yeah, we're looking good there. All right, watch for some things in your inbox before the meeting, and we'll look forward to everyone's participation during that meeting. All right.
Great.
Okay, moving on, the approval of the minutes. I know at least had a couple minor nits. Anyone else have anything substantive? Thought they represented the meeting pretty well.
Nice job.
All right, so we'll move and accept those minutes as minorly edited. All right. Communications report from the building department. Continued activity, but I think we will watch the variance that we discussed previously relative to large projects versus other projects, but still looks like a lot of stuff coming in. Have we gotten the permits for the off of Iron Horse, the big unit that's going in there? They keep moving piles from one side of the lot to the other. Pretty soon there's got
The former Simscroft Echo land.
Right. Yeah. Looks like they're getting ready. Could be huge. That's all we have. Anything else for tonight?
Yeah, I was just going to make a few comments since this is my second to last board meeting. I just wanted to, thank everybody for all the help that they provided, and what a great group that we have. Rob and I ran 6 years ago, Rob, on keeping the AAA bond rating, which I think we accomplished, keeping the funding, bond funding at 10 years, stable mill rate, and debt service about 7%. I think we accomplished all those. So I had Amy give me a little bit of statistics. So the average taxes when Rob and I came in were about $7,400, and they're about $8,300 now. So that's about 11% increase over 6 years, or about 2%. So I think we really accomplished it. I shouldn't say we accomplished it. One of the things I hope Mike and Bert take away from this meeting is just what a great group that we have. We all work together. Art's sitting there supporting everybody. Lisa's supporting everybody. We're all supporting everybody as a group. And that's really what it's about. It's always, to me, felt like people have left the politics at the door when they walked into this group, and that's to me the best thing that I've appreciated about it. The town is really fortunate to have such a great group of people to be on the Board of Finance. I also wanted to just thank Rob for his leadership. I know the first year was kind of baptism by fire and it was a little rough, but he's really the one that's kind of brought the group together and really has done a phenomenal job uniting us and driving what we've been able to accomplish as a group. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Kevin.
So I'm going to say something, but we're going to say more in December. So I'm not really going to say a lot here. I didn't want to give you the impression that we don't recognize your service and Rob's, because it's been phenomenal. And actually, I'm going to miss you both. And in fact, you can expect phone calls from me multiple times, because you're not getting off that easy. But I want to echo Kevin's words that it's really been a collaborative process, and really the talent on the board has been so impressive to be for me to see. And Kevin's work on the pension is really phenomenal. If you've ever been to a pension subcommittee meeting, he really is a master of that information. And of course, Rob's leadership, it's been a pleasure to work with you, and I can't imagine doing it without you, actually, or either of you. But very happy to welcome Mike and Bert too, because I think you find it interesting and fun, and as Kevin said, it's totally non-political when we're talking about these issues.
The overlapping boards, I think, give the group great continuity, and you guys will do great. The first year or two, if you don't, you have that blank stare, don't be afraid to ask what IBNR stands for. All right? It only took me 4 years to get that one. So, all right, great.
So I make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Kevin. And a second.
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We will see you on the 1st,
Okay.
Thanks.
either in person or not. So,
Thanks.
thanks a lot.